Just like generic.
Now, me, I'm not good at this. I'm really sorry at this. If you want like truncated minutes, take minutes.
No, I would say
Yeah, but.
you can pretend
Yeah, no, I'll tell my questions. Maybe you.
It's dangerous.
Is it this? Yeah, wasn't it not? Is this the display? I thought it, oh, here it is. Yeah.
But that was this thing, and that releases it.
Oh, let's see what happens.
And what is it?
Oh, that has something to do with media. But is anything happening? No, it's not. It's not connected. Oh, that's not the. You're probably right. That is. So the stupid thing is that light. I don't see anything. Okay, wait a little bit. Okay.
Just 30 seconds more.
Oh, shh.
Okay, you're on.
And look at
All your private emails are on.
47 of them from midnight last night. Damn.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna find the note well. Where's the stupid here? No. Man, it's hot in here. Yeah. All right.
Just turning AC on.
Yeah. Ooh. Ooh. No, he needs to be turned on. You see? What's the name of the? What's the date today? 7/22. There's one.
We have 3 minutes into it. Do you want to pick it up?
Yeah. All right. Time is burning here. Looks like we got all the intrepid Ospf working group participants here. Not a large numbers, but all those who matter. Yes.
I like the timing on that one.
Right. Yes. No. Since this is Friday, I'm sure all of you have seen the note well in various and sundry working groups. Just remember that if you know about any IPR, you're required by virtue of your participation to disclose it. And like the other working groups, we'll poll twice, once right before working group adoption and once during at the start of or during working group last call. Okay? So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Ave for the working group status. Okay, if I can see what happens here. I don't know if this goes too slow. It doesn't look like it's too bad. I'll do it locally. I'm doing it right now from the page.
So let's hear describe, right? Double look.
Is anybody on Jabber? I don't see.
No, nobody.
No, that's me there. Oh yeah, yeah.
Why don't you see the slide on remote?
I don't know. I got
the slides on remote.
You can
Oh,
scan.
I see it.
Okay.
I see it. Okay, we can kick off. Next slide.
How do you do it?
Does that work?
I don't
Oh,
know.
because you have PDF.
I'm using PDF. Maybe I should,
Okay, well, that's fine.
I can do this, yeah.
Okay, we have one RFC since the last time. That's the seamless BFD. Ali is saying whatever. Hey, we finished it though. Okay. Next slide. We have one document in RFC editor queue. This is running Ospf v3 over IPv4 as a transport. 12 revisions on the document, but it's ready. Next slide. We have TTZ, which went through a lot of hoops, and finally it's in expert review. Should be done pretty soon. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So the expert review found a fair number of issues. I know that they're being addressed, but given the number of issues, I would also encourage more reviews from people in the working group who have relevant expertise, like all of you. Get more reviews. Because, sorry, it's in expert review. I know it went past working group last call. Most of the documents that go past working group last call in OSPF are really quite lovely, easy, simple to progress, well thought out, well reviewed, and so on, which is great. In this particular one, possibly because it's experimental and there's not as much interest in it, I don't think it got the same level of review. That's part of why I sent it off to an expert review. I may do that again to have another routing director review, not because I want to be in good shape, but in addition to forced reviews, it's also nice if people have, it's going to be a little while before it's ready to go into the ISG and IETF last call. So it'd be nice to have more people look at it. That's all.
I'll take another read on this edition, on this version. One thing I was going to say, I talked to Chris, and it's on his list to see if it meets his comments. And I don't know that it's really as much lack of review as it attempts. It has ambitious goals. I think that is as much to do with it as the amount of review. That's just my opinion, though.
And it's experimental track, so. Okay, two other documents which we have requested publication already. One was Ospf 2-part metric that had some wireless use cases, and Ospf v2 segment routing extension is also in publication requested. We ended up doing working group last call twice because of one of the late IPR disclosures, and that is concluded. So now it's requested publication. Next. There are a few drafts which are close to last call. Let me start with the last bullet. Shepherding is something which we really need help on. There are 4 of them where we can potentially use your help. Yingzhen is saying she'll do one. we can have authors bribe each other and see if that's one way to do it. But we can take some help there. Link overload is one. Host bit for Ospf v2 is another. Entropy label is another. I'm saying MRT the last because I just realized it has a normative reference on Ospf v3 extended LSA, which is sort of stuck. So we'll have to figure out that probably for a little later. Other 3 we can do soon after.
Oh, sorry. Oh, the wrong way.
All right. Other active drafts. So Ospf v3 extended LSA, as we said, it has been, I think that from the author's draft is in a good shape, but we need implementation. The draft has not changed actually for a while, but without implementations, this is drastic enough that we don't feel we can progress it. So really, we are looking for some experience with the implementation. If there are volunteers, we can work with you. Go back one more.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
On Ospf v3 segment routing, we have some update today. Yang model, we have some update today. FlowSpec, we have no updates. Again, this draft is quite stable for some time. Operator-defined TLB was one way to have operators send things which is more proprietary to them. There is an alternate to that, which is service distribution, which we are going to see presentation from Padma today. And there are, again, two ways to it. So what we want to do here is see some interest from this community, and if it makes sense to progress one of them. And there was, okay. Beer work is happening in the beer working group, and CCamp has some other related documents. That's it. Who's first? Peter? Yeah. So are you going to do, so you're going to, okay. We'll move the slides. We'll move the slides to you just the next one. Yeah.
Okay, so my name is Peter Shrinac. I work for Cisco. I'm going to give a quick update on the segment routing drafts. Next slide. So this has been posted or started, the work started a long time back. It has been presented multiple times. Oh, okay. I can't see it. And we are trying to keep the V2 and V3 drafts in sync. Next slide, please. So we have multiple Ospf implementation for Ospf v2, and there has been an interoperability testing done between multiple implementations. Next slide. So there has been some changes in the v2 part. So there has been some cleanup done as a part of the preparation for the workgroup last call. We added an implementation status chapter in the draft. There has been some clarification what to do if the prefix sub-TLV is missing or appears multiple times in the binding TLV. Next slide. We also added some changes in terms of the algorithm TLV. So what we clarified is that if it is not advertised, then the node is basically treated as not being segment routing capable.
I just have one comment there. Since we have, we've submitted this for publication, I hope ISIS will do the same. I know Stefano said that they were just considering what to do in ISIS meeting, but I hope you'll do the same.
No.
Les Ginsberg. The situation in ISIS is a bit different.
Okay.
Because the advertisement of the algorithm sub-TLV, at least at the moment, is optional. So.
Okay.
Yeah, this is, segment routing is a little different than some of the other OSPF drafts in that there are not only implementations, there are deployed implementations of both ISIS and OSPF. So it's, well, it would be nice to align. It's not as easy to just say, okay, we just change it. Did I go the right way?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So we passed the workgroup last call for SPv2. There may be though some changes as a result of the conflict resolution draft. And one thing we want to do, we want to remove any.
So could we go back to the last slide for a moment?
Uh-huh.
So was this change discussed on the list?
It was sent to the authors of the draft. That's not okay?
It needs to be, you have to have discussion on the list. We've had
Okay.
these issues before. That,
Okay, but I think this was kind of in the draft from the beginning. We just add the specific text, right? But there's no other way to.
So if there's, no, all changes should be brought forward to the list for discussion if this is a working group document, period. So, and this is clearly not a simple editorial change. Okay, and
But
so there's.
okay, so we didn't really meant to change any behavior. The text says the SR algorithm TLV is there to advertise the capability, the SR capability of a node. We just added the explicit text, what happens if it is not advertised. So I don't know, I mean, do you have some?
That seems to be, so I need to look at this.
Okay.
And we need to discuss it on the list. And if that means delaying publication, that's better than having to change it with errata.
That's fine. So I can bring it to the list, but it's a small thing. I don't think it actually changes anything, but I agree.
Sorry, I haven't looked at this since, just to clarify, was this change made after working group last call in the most recent version? Because I know it's been in the queue for a while. I've had a long queue and I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry, this one came into the queue, went away.
Not after second one.
Okay, but when we made the second working group last call, the expectation was that was simply about the IPR issue, and that's what was reported in the last call. So people who were not concerned about the IPR issue are highly likely to have not read through it for a technical difference. I think that's the issue. I do apologize for answering off cuff that it's not, but one of the issues around the segment routing work has been making sure there's sufficient transparency in the communications, because since it is going to be an industry proposed standard, it is very important, as usual, that we are transparent and everybody gets to contribute and have opinions. I am particularly concerned with this draft because, as AC knows, and you know, it's been 2 years that we did the IANA early registry, and those have expired. So I either need to make a decision if the work is not going to progress rapidly because there are technical changes at this point, then we need to make a decision if I want to go to the IESG and ask for the first exception ever to this process of you can do an early registration and ask for an extension to make sure that the deployed segment routing is not disrupted by changes to the IANA code points in the future. So really, if there are technical changes, bring them to the list immediately. I do have some other drafts ahead of this to review, but I'm expecting to get to it in August, hopefully sooner than the early part of August. Please have the open, transparent discussions. That's what we do here. Thank you.
I can go to the next one. Okay. So one thing which we probably will end up doing in the draft is removing the text which is highlighted there and just reference the conflict resolution draft, because that text has been there from day one. We said we are preferring the individual prefix advertisement compared to SRMS, but now the conflict resolution draft actually may go the other way around.
It's been working group last calls. How are you changing it?
This one of the reasons
We're taking this out because it's going to be covered in conflict resolution.
That's fine, but you can't, but if it's not done, then I can't publish it. Taking technical things out, even if you're putting them someplace else, means it's not done. I would like it to be done too, very much. I know you're tired of it. I'm not trying to hammer you on it, but
well, then I think we need to go to the IESG and ask for the extension.
Yeah, that's where I was heading to.
Yeah, okay.
And the other thing is the weight advertisement, which is again the part of the conflict resolution draft. And if we need to add that, we can come up with a new draft or we can include it here. So that's another change which we may need to do in the draft.
Yeah. If those of you who are within Spring, this weight is not a weight for routing. It's a weight for conflict resolution, which is, I think that the hammer on this conflict, we're over designing this, but that's a different thing. Yes,
Yeah.
right.
No comment.
Okay, so can go to the next slide. So this just mentions the same thing as Elias said. I mean, we allocated the code points. They're going to expire in October. Then we either move or we extend it. So
I don't think it's October. I think they're gone.
They're gone.
well, this is what I said on the ANA page.
No, 26th June, it's gone.
Oh, okay. I copied it from the page, so maybe
They're expired. We get the early notification. I mean, IANA does an excellent job of reporting back. And no, they're expiring. Either they expired last month or they're expiring in July.
Oh, I trust you. This is from the page, so.
So 26th June was the expiry, if I remember.
Can you check? Maybe I see in the background.
Yes.
Yeah, it says October actually. I don't know, because I thought they expired already.
So that might get, I will go double check. I'm going off of the report as opposed to having looked. We can, if you have time after this, go talk to Michelle Cotton, who's in charge of IANA. We can verify what's going on there. But I was hoping to simply progress it with the expectation there'd be no other OSPF drafts. Your presentation has been very useful in clarifying that there are still changes being made to the document, so it seems like we're going to have to extend them. Thank you.
Okay. I think that's it. Oh, so for V3, there's no implementation that I know of. If there is any and you know about, just let us know, because we need to work for the implementation to progress the draft. We keep the drafts in sync, but there's no implementation so far. So we need that to progress. Is there any other slide?
No, that's it.
Okay, so that's it.
I don't know why it's happening. Okay. Yingzhen? Okay. Let's see the expiration. I guess this does work with this, even with this. Yeah, it does. Try.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yingzhen Xu. I'm here today to present an update of this OSPF Young model. So what has changed since last IETF? We got one comment from one of our Cisco implementations that we have missed one of the OSPF option bit in OSPF LSA header. So we went through all the OSPF option bit and added this few missing ones back into the draft. This one this is interface priority. That's the priority used to select DR and BDR. And we also somehow missed this one. And that's one review comment we pick up from the IETF email alias. So we added this leave configuration back to interface. These are a few minor changes we did for this release. The BDR IP address. So for this data model is designed to be used by both OSPF v2 and v3. So for all the common fields with an IP address, we use the IP address instead of IPv4 address or IPv6 address. Rename interface, leave interface to name. So we have a list of interface inside one area. And the key of this list, we change it to name instead of another layer of interface. Rename receive back packet to if receive back packet. So this one is one of the notifications. This one is purely a name change, so it's more consistent with the SMP MIP notifications, SMP MIP trap. The if feature statement for multi-area adjacency. This one used to be under the list of multi-areas, and we move it to the container outside the list. So a couple of release back, we decided for all the list, we will add a container outside of the list. So this if feature statement should be inside the container, not under the list. And we missed to move this one. So all other, if there is a if feature statement, it should be under the container.
So I just going to state, if you're not familiar with Yang types, IP address is, to make an analogy to C programming, it's a union of either an IP address or IPv6 address.
Thank you. Okay, so the virtual interface configuration used to be in non-backbone area. So we had a discussion in our OSPF design team. We think it's more accurate to move the configuration of a virtual link to area 0, and the transit area of this virtual link should be non-area 0. And we also remove the cost configuration that was on the virtual-link configuration, but should not be there. The checksum type in LSA header, it used to be a uint16. So we now change the format to checksum to be a hex string. This is just, for easier to read and more consistent to what we are used to see in show command. Oh, these two changes are because of the module name changes of kitchen model and the routing config model. So we are importing these two modules, so we have to make the corresponding changes. Okay, the current status of this OSPF model. So it's been exactly 2 years since we first presented this model. We made a lot of changes over the 2 years, added a lot of new features. And as you can see, pretty much for this release, all the changes are due to comments we got either through IETF email or through some implementations. So all the authors will encourage everybody here to review it and send us comments. And we really appreciate that effort. That will also help us with the publishing of this model. So far, we consider this model is feature complete. And at least I know Cisco has an implementation of this model. If you know any other implementation of this model, please let us know.
Yeah, go ahead.
The next step of this model, since the OSPF segment routing extension draft is being last called, so we are ready to, we need to update the IETF OSPF segment routing YANG model just to make sure everything is up to date and accurate. And we may need to do some operation state change based on the new op state requirement that we reach at this IETF. And we are ready to progress this draft.
I just add, this is one of the models that I said has gotten quite large. I think it's better to freeze the feature set as what it is, unless this op state hangs us out and there are features pretty soon. So I think it's a good time to progress it. The most significant thing we've done recently is move the virtual link. Now it was in the transit area because historically that's where it was configured on the circa 1990 iOS implementation. And we thought about this and said, well, should it really be here or should it be, it's part of the backbone. So we moved it to the backbone with the transit area just as a identifier. And it really seemed to make more sense there, because that's where you'd see it in the operational states. We align those together, and in our implementation, we found it wasn't really that hard to map it to the, on iOS, to map it back or do it under the cover. So it really belongs there. So that was good to have it aligned between the configuration and the operation, have them together. So I think we're making some minor things. We've been somewhat struggling. Some people keep telling us we should have separate interfaces. Not some people. One person keeps wanting us to do a separate OSPF interface and OSPF v3 interface, but there's really only like 3 fields that are different that we can handle those with a when clause. And heretofore, since it's been this way this long, we don't see the need to split it apart. Anyway, I'm not an offer, but I've been participating for the last 2 years. We already had enough. We already had like 7 or 8 offers, so we didn't need another one. But I've been heavily involved with it as well.
Question?
Justin, so there's a Spring YANG model for segment routing, and there's some overlap. I think it would be really good to sit together and
You mean
have
the
clean
the-
augmentation one to another, so there's no
the
overlap.
segment routing model in the Spring?
Yes. So
Oh, that one defines all the common configurations. So the OSPF actually import that one and only define that the part specific in OSPF.
last time I looked, there was some overlap. I think would be really good to clean it up and be done.
Okay, we'll make sure.
Yeah, we'll do that, but I think we've been, Ying Zhen's an offer on that one. I think we've been aligning those in lockstep and tried to keep the stuff out of the two, the ISIS and OSPF models. We've tried to keep stuff that was in the common module out of it and just import and augment.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we'll add some stuff to start draft reference from here, and maybe also SS probably would be really good to complete alignment across IGPs and
Yeah,
SARS.
yeah. We're sure that will happen.
Alice, how are we doing on implementations? How much of this is paper versus actually having shaken out some of the issues? Does anyone in the working group, or do you have any ideas?
So for the implementation, you can see most of the comments we got are actually through implementations. They realize, oh, you missed this one, and that one, maybe you want to change it a little bit. So.
Okay. And, sorry, do you have an expected time frame for finishing the work?
You mean the implementation?
No, I mean, after the implementation's getting the draft out. We're trying to get, in general, we want to get Yang models finished up very soon and not, very soon being in 6-9 months if need be, but we need to understand the dependencies of this. And so that's why I'm asking what your expected time frame is for finishing the work.
So our biggest dependency is the output state. And once that is decided, so we probably go through some editorial changes, and then I think we are ready for last call.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the biggest problem with this model is just the size. So it's always intimidating to get people to review something.
Yeah.
A draft that's over 100 pages. Once the draft exceeds 100 pages, it kind of falls into that zone of people on the routing directorate don't want to get assigned it. But
I'm familiar with the issue.
yes,
This one will have a hard time finding a separate.
but the good news is we've had Derek and Ying Zhen have spent, and I've spent some time too, and then we've had Jeffrey and Helen's not at this site. Helen Chen have really spent a lot of time, and to a lesser extent, we've had some other. I'm trying to think who else has looked at it. Stefan from Orange.
Yeah. So we have a review meeting, a design team meeting every other week.
But it's been mainly Jeffrey, Helen,
in
and Ying.
2 years.
Zhen.
So I know you've been working on it really hard for a long time, and I appreciate it because it's really important. But because it's really important, maybe once every week, let's get this thing done. I know you're not clocked by IETF meetings, which is really good, but we really need to finish up. And so just please prioritize. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess maybe my question will be Chris Hops. Oh, Chris Hops, Deutsche Telekom. Maybe will help with this. So you said you're blocked on possibly an op state and maybe on the routing. I don't know if you're blocked on the routing path or whatever.
No.
Okay, so that's not blocking. So it's just the op state. What things are you imagining you're blocked on there?
We're trying to decide whether we need to prune based on applied state or whether we just say, okay, we're leaving it like it is.
Okay, I haven't looked at the latest version. Did you do an applied intended split?
Right
No,
now,
we do a config op state, but we do a config and state.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to get away from that, right? And you inherit that from routing config, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't think you're blocked.
No.
I think you're ready to go.
You think so? Okay. Okay. Well, the only other thing we might do is we have a lot of things that you could get in applied, but we could leave those over there. That's not too bad. We could just leave it alone. That would actually be the less disruptive if we just say, and it would also we wouldn't have this lapse of time while the network devices implemented the multiple data stores, where we wouldn't be able to get the applied state. So,
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we knew this until this time.
Yes,
right? But I don't think we're going to be able to change the split between the config and the state, especially since it would have to change in routing.
Yes.
Right.
So the way the output state is organized is right now we have, for example, a group for interface configuration. So that's used for interface configuration. We use this same group in output state for interface output state.
Right.
And then we have another set of like a real, like counters, all those, how many bad packets, all those like real state statistics for state.
Yeah, the counters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the counters. Those are like a real.
I mean, a lot of people, we don't like that that's split like that, but right now we don't want to block waiting for that solution. I don't think, right? I think our guidance is we should just move forward with drafts that are done.
Yeah, if people are okay with this model and the way how we
double
organize
check what
it.
I'm saying, but
Yeah.
I don't. I think you're probably ready to go. It's probably all good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I know we had somebody from Huawei that helped out with the keychain, and I can't remember. Do we have somebody from Huawei looking at this model? Yingzhen, you know?
There was someone.
And I forget who it was. Yeah, but it's kind of hard because of the time difference. Yeah, but if we could get somebody to do email and review on it.
Yeah. So anybody from Huawei is welcome to contact me.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it Dave Allen?
Yeah, it's Dave Allen. So I don't, the reason I was so interjected so much in there, I also participate on the routing Yang design team. It was,
With the sticker. Yeah, here it is. Dave, you can use the clicker.
Okay, so I got this slight sense of deja vu up here. As I see a lot of familiar faces, and I'm viewing it from this perspective. So I'll try and see if I can add a little bit this time around to make it interesting for the folks that have heard it before. What I want to talk about is the primary draft is the framework for computed multicast applied to MPLS segment routing. As of this IETF, next chart, please.
You should be able to do it,
of
but-
course.
I mean,
Yeah.
okay. You could try.
I keep forgetting I'm in the driver's seat here. This was introduced at the last IETF in PIM and spring. And at the time, the chairs more or less had concluded if it was going to progress, it was going to progress in PIM. For this IETF, I brought forward the IGP extensions, which is the additions that would be required to OSPF and the additions that would be required for ISIS, which is the reason I'm standing in front of you today. Now, for a quick recap, what is all this about? What we're doing is we're applying computing to determining the routing of multicast trees. So this is not a unicast convergence and handshake, nor is it the stateless multicast approach of Beer. This is the routing system determining where the roots, the leaves, and the replication points are. And the key thing is that with this knowledge, because I'm not only sorting out my own role with respect to multicast, but I also know what the adjacent nodes around me are doing, I have the ability to interconnect them with unicast tunnels, sort of the key points in the multicast tree. And what that does is it significantly reduces the amount of state that needs to be installed in the overall network to implement, for example, large numbers of multicast trees. What the draft does is it gives you the terminology, a layout of the overall approach, what we're trying to achieve, describes how we would do both loose and specified trees, where we can specify the tree to pretty much to any degree of granularity in terms of what parts of it are loose and what parts of it are strict. Describes the algorithm that's used and goes into the FIB installation procedures. Now, that's actually a bit of a wrinkle in this because we are talking about a hybrid of multicast and unicast connectivity to construct the tree. The net result of this is frequently failures will be repaired by unicast convergence, and what multicast convergence will end up being is simply a re-optimization. So that's why there actually are some procedures involved. So the notion is like I said, we've got trees that are constructed of only those nodes that absolutely needed to install state interconnected with the unicast tunnels. And the idea is that we put enough information in the routing system such that it has all the information it needs to compute these trees. And so we just have a couple of TLVs we add to the IGP for multicast interest. There's a previous exemplar of this in terms of MOSPF from a long time ago, and more recently RFC, I think it was 6329 for shortest path bridging. Now you get a bunch of benefits out of doing this. One of the things is because the knowledge of multicast, all the multicast participants is pre-positioned in the network, the only additional information I need to handle a topology change is the actual TLVs that advertise the topology change. So when there is a failure or a return to service in the network, there's an absolute minimum amount of messaging to reconverge the network. This actually is kind of a virtuous circle because we can just get on with the computing. The control plane is not going to be continually interrupted with additional information that it doesn't need. Like I mentioned, we have a substantially reduced amount of state in the data plane. The example I keep quoting is if I got a tree with a root and 5 leaves, worst case is 10 nodes will need to install state. Average is probably about 7, and that's irrespective of network size because we're taking advantage of that pre-existing unicast connectivity as part of the tree construction. Because we're able to use ECMP with the unicast, we actually need to produce either minimum cost or near minimum cost shortest path trees to avoid the possibility of packet duplication on any interface when we're using ECMP on the unicast tunnels. So it's one of these things where we had a challenge to address the ECMP problem, and it was something that turned out to be virtuous because we're actually looking at anywhere up to about a 30% reduction in the bandwidth required for a given multicast tree. Unicast recovery will address most failures, particularly in the sparse trees. And to me, one of the things I really like is this is just a straight reuse of the existing MPLS data plane. So, this could be applied to existing deployed equipment as a control plane upgrade. Now, the key thing that we're doing here is we're actually pruning trees to sort out where the replication points are going to be, where those components are that we will need state. And there's 2 classes of prunes that we use. The first set of prunes, it doesn't matter what order you do them in. You'll ultimately get to the same place. And if you can successfully resolve a particular tree with only those class of prunes, you know you have produced a minimum cost shortest path tree. The issue is when you don't fully resolve a tree using only those prunes, because you have prunes where there's an ordering dependency, where if I do them in one order, I will come up with one answer. If I do them in a different order, I'll come up with another answer. That's where we have some metrics that are described to make a really good guess, but when the dust settles, we need to go back and double check that tree to make sure it's ECMP friendly, and there are rules that can be agreed on across all implementations as to what you do to address a tree to ensure it's ECMP friendly. Experimentally, it was about 97% of leaves will successfully resolve without having to do what I call a guess. And I only need to fix up about 0.3% of the guesses or so. It's 0.3 or 0.03. I can't actually remember. It's some very, very small number of the guesses that actually need a fix up. So we have this notion of loose and specified trees. A loose tree is one where it is the routing of the tree is determined entirely on the basis of the topology. So all we do is we advertise the root and the leaves in the IGP, and there's sufficient information for routing convergence to fill in the gaps. And then we have a specified tree where What we do is we concatenate a series of multicast SIDs with specified waypoints, and all we do in the IGP is we advertise a list of the waypoints, the routes and the leaves, and if there are any loose segments in there, the routing system again will just fill them in. If segments cross over, it's not a problem because they each have a unique segment ID, so they can be disambiguated, so we won't see duplication or looping. The IGP changes that are required to do this are comparatively trivial. We need a total of 3 TLVs. The first is a means of advertising the capability and the algorithm that we're using, because you need to agree on the algorithm in this case, because everybody needs to come up with the same answer. Right now, we've just described it as being extensible through an OUI. It's also been suggested to me there are techniques for doing this that probably would be more acceptable to the community, and I'll be looking at that for the next version of the draft. There is the SID group binding TLV, which basically is the basic building block for constructing any source multicast. And that's what I do is what we do in the IGP is the actual construction technique is to do a series of a full mesh of source specific trees between all senders and all receivers to build it up. And then there's the pin tree descriptor TLV, which is simply a list of the nodes that participate in the tree, such as the waypoint cross connects between different multicast SIDs, the roots or the leaves. And in there, like I said, it's just a list. There isn't any ordering. It can be spread across multiple TLVs if it overflows a TLV. It's fairly simple. So we've brought forward the OSPF v2 specifics in the draft. We'll be looking to do this technique also for IPv6 at some later point, and we'll bring forward the v3 specifics then. So we have a compute capability TLV, which we've put in the router information LSA. We have the multicast group to SID binding sub TLV. So it's proposed as part of the extended prefix TLV as part of the LSA.
Peter Pshanak from Cisco. So I'm just wondering, why did you use the extended prefix LSA for these advertisements? Because the extended prefix LSA is used to advertise prefixes. These are multicast groups and sources. So what is the relationship between the prefix and which prefix do you use to advertise this?
I'd actually have to go back and check with my co-author.
Okay, I think we need something else than this.
Okay.
It's probably not the right place. Same comment for ISIS. I don't think it's related to any unicast prefix, so it should be a different container.
Okay, thank you. I'll take that under advisement. And the third one is the pin tree descriptor sub TLV. And again, it's proposed as part of the extended prefix TLV, and I presume the same comment applies. So I can skip the ISIS specifics. So I guess the key observation here is we have the framework draft, we have the IGP extensions. Of course, in the fullness of time, other things will be required, such as interworking and harmonizing it with the rest of the multicast architecture. But at least there's enough here that I think folks can read it, understand and critique the approach. So I would welcome you to read it. Jeff.
So we recommend we'll review it, and what we also plan for next version is to specify how H joins result in state in the network. So IGMP MLD joins will result in state in the network. We'll also think about multi-area, multi-level, because this draft doesn't specify how to deal with multi-area.
Yeah. So, any other questions or comments?
Yeah, this is AC. I'm just wondering, where would PIM own the solution and the ultimate decision as to whether this is going to be an IETF standard?
That's my understanding of what's been worked out between the chairs of PIM and Spring.
Okay.
They sort of fit. The Spring folks said, we aren't really multicast experts. This should be critiqued by PIM. So that's where we're at.
They were the ones who killed the existing MOSPF, so I guess that they would be the ones to bring it back from the dead.
That gives me a real warm and fuzzy there.
Yes.
Chris Ops, Deutsche Telekom. So when you say the OUI, there's better ways to do it. I'm just curious where OUI came from. I mean, you're getting a namespace for algorithm IDs. Is that what the idea is?
Yeah.
So
Simply so
you
there
probably
can be-
do like an IANA registry for algorithms, or
Well, the thing is to allow vendor-specific extensions. So with the OUI mechanism, for example, if Deutsche Telekom had an OUI, Deutsche Telekom could deploy their own multicast algorithm.
yeah. I mean, generally we have to have agreement in the industry on the algorithm, right? I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah, so
okay.
what I've proposed is a default one and then a means of extending it.
Yeah. Okay.
But if I'm understanding it, sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to interrupt. But if I understand the algorithm correctly, everybody within the domain has to use the same algorithm.
Yes, they do.
Yes. Okay.
Everybody needs to come up with the same answer.
Exactly.
Because I can't have the guy who I'm about to tunnel to decide, oh, I'm not going to participate in this tree.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I understand what you're saying about like vendor specific ones, but it's pretty rare nowadays that you have a single vendor network, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think IANA registry might be okay for algorithms.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
I'll just for the minutes. I agree with Chris. I hadn't gone to that level of review because of the question of whether or not the solution would be an IETF multicast blessed solution.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I might be able to shed some light on at least Chris Bowers with Juniper. I think the origin of the use of OUI has to do with the fact that their IS Trill and shortest path bridging also used ISIS, and it was sort of natural for them to use OUIs because of the bridge switch kind of
And
environment.
being one of the creators of shortest path bridging, I sort of use that as my template.
Right.
So
It's a decision whether or not we sort of continue that in this for a more, IETF oriented protocol or not.
Right. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you very much.
Peter? It works.
It works?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's an update for the T-Link reuse draft. So I'm not going to describe the problem. I suppose people are familiar. It has been presented 3 times already. I think the problem is understood and acknowledged by the large community of the vendors and users. There has been some good discussion on the list, and I think we are going to do some updates to the draft after the IETF based on some discussions that we even have here. So I know we are in an Ospf working group, but I'm going to mention ISIS because it looks like the same problem applies to the ISIS as well. And thanks to Chris for doing all the checking, but he tested and looked at 3 different implementations and look at how the presence of the T-link attributes are being handled by the application in terms of link being used by RSVP-TE. And there's a quite large subset of the sub-TLVs which are being used as an indication when RSVP-TE is running on the link. So I guess this is just to say that this is not just a problem in Ospf, the same problem exists in the ISIS. So the draft, as it has been written originally and as it is now, has been trying to solve the problem of the advertisements that are being used for TE and then the advertisements that are going to be used for anything else. But I think we have another problem which we may want to address in the draft, which is if we need some application-specific link attributes or different values for different applications, we want to have a way to say, for example, I have an SRLG value which is used for a specific set of applications and another value which may be used for a different set of applications. So we have like The metric is something that already exists. We have IGP metric and a TE metric, so that's another example. So I think we want to move forward and try to address that problem as well in this context. So in terms of OSPF, what we are thinking and proposing is to use the existing TE opaque LSA and all the attributes defined there for TE, RSVP TE, and then use the extended link LSA for advertising the link attributes for any other applications, and then have some way of saying, this value is being used for this set of applications, in having some kind of a application bit mask, which would say, this value can be used by application X, Y, and Z, and the other value may be used for something else. So we don't have the details. It's up to the discussion, but I think we have an idea how we can do this. So in terms of RSIS, it's a bit different situation. RSIS doesn't have the dedicated container for the TE advertisements, but we can either use the existing TLVs and add these application-specific sub-TLV, or we can define another set of link attributes and add the application mask there. I think it's better from the backward compatibility perspective. I think this needs to be sorted out in the ISI's working group. I just put it here as what are the options that we have. So we would like to have the solution which is as much similar as it can be between the ISIs and OSPF. Obviously, there are differences, so we have to take those into the consideration, but I think we should use the same approach in both protocols. And basically, I'm trying to make this, or we are trying to make this a workgroup document, and I guess there's something needed in ISI's working group which would address this.
Robert Rashuk. Peter, just a clarification question. Is there any relation to the affinity bits with the application values you're going to carry, or there's completely no relation at all?
So what do you mean by affinity bits? So you can mark the bits. You can, look, the way I look at it is whatever link attributes you advertise, you may want to say, I want these values to be used by this set of applications. Because you may have a different application and use a different affinity bits for that application.
Oh, so affinity bits will be part of that, effectively. Oh, I know, but if I have link for voice, and a metric for voice will not apply for that link, then I have somehow messed up my link.
No, you can say, today if you advertise a link attribute, right, it is only used for RSVP-TE. You have no way to advertise, I don't know, bandwidth for someone else, or SRLG. I want to use SRLG for LFA. How do I advertise it? I can make it part of the TE advertisements, but that has some implication. So you're trying to advertise something which has been defined for some RSVP-TE purpose, but we want to use it for something else. Any questions, comments?
I'll just say, so look for that new draft based on, we actually had a discussion this morning among the main combatants on this draft, and we're going to work through a new revision. Okay, I got mine. Yep. Okay, this was the draft that I tried to get Alvaro to come, but he's been traveling for like a month straight now, so he went home today, and so he couldn't be here, and so I got Anton Smirnov to make these. We tried to we presented this, or Anton presented this back in IETF 89. I'm going to tell you what it is in the next slide. Refresh your memories. And then we briefly discussed it. We said, okay, it seems like it's straightforward. I did a call for adoption, and I think there wasn't a lot of interest. I think I might have been one of the few people who supported it. It wasn't a lot. So we kind of just let it, like we do with documents that people aren't interested in, we just let them lie and expect the authors to, if they're still interested, to renew the discussion on the list and try and, generate some interest. But that didn't happen either. So all of a sudden Alvaro said, hey, why, this is useful. Why didn't we do this? So he pushed again for it. And we got a review from 2 people from the routing directorate, got it assigned, and they both said, okay, it does solve a problem. Maybe we should go forward with it. Let's see, where's the, I'll use this as well. So it's pretty simple. In a dual stack IPv6, IPv4 network using MPLS TE or RSPV TE, I probably should say, that you could simplify the operations. OSPF, as you know, we have 2 protocols. The OSPF v3 does support both address families, but is not as well deployed as OSPF v2. They both have TE extensions. Now, especially where you have the topologies are coincide or close to coinciding, you really only need to advertise TE in one of the 2 protocols. You don't need both. And what's keeping you from doing that is the fact that the TE for the 2 specific only defines tunnel endpoints for the corresponding OSPF v2 only has TE only has tunnel endpoints for IPv4, and OSPF v3 TE only has tunnel endpoints for IPv6. The other thing you might want to do, and this is, of course, you would really want the 2 topologies to be close to coinciding. It works a lot better if they're just, what do they call that when they're not if they're not congruent? I guess that's the right IETF term. Then sharing LSPs makes less sense. So all we do is, this was a draft, I think it was Raul and Kariti did this tunnel additional prefixes draft to define additional tunnel endpoints within the router TE advertisement. So all we do is we take this TLV from this draft, and we allow it to be used in either OSPF v2 TE or OSPF v3 TE. So you can advertise tunnel endpoints for either protocol. And that's it. It's pretty simple. And so now that we've had this, I think one of the problems is the authors haven't been. So what I'll do is I'll renew this. What Alvaro would suggest is we just do AD sponsored because it's useful. But it would be better if we could get everybody interested, or not everybody, but more people interested. So go ahead, Aaliyah.
Yeah, Aaliyah, I really prefer to have, as you know, I don't AD sponsor very many drafts, and generally, if I ask your AD sponsor, it goes to RTGWG so it can get wider view. Obviously, that's not the correct approach here. It would be OSPF getting wider review, but then, so there's sort of 2 pieces of the question. Is there interest in doing the work here, and is anyone concerned if the work goes forward? Because I need to weigh both of those as possibilities.
I wouldn't imagine, has anybody read the draft recently? I didn't think so. Okay. We'll start a thread on the list. Chris?
Chris Bowers. I would actually, I'm not like an expert on IETF process and AD sponsored drafts and so on, but it would be rather odd, I think, for it to go forward specifically for something so specific as OSPF traffic engineering, for it to go forward as AD sponsored. Typically, AD sponsored is sort of something a little more. I understand you can. I understand you can do what you want, but you also then set a precedent by doing that. And I don't know if that's particularly a good precedent. So it would, if we think this is useful, we should say so and work on it. If we don't, we should also be vocal about that.
You know, you might think that, but nobody's offered me chocolate yet. No, more to the point, obviously, I mean, Chris is right. I would not, one of my questions is, this is not something that would make sense to do against the working group's will. The question is it a good idea, a bad idea, or is everyone tired because it's Friday?
So the action is we're going to try and generate some more interest and see if we can go through the normal process. I mean, I certainly think it's kind of simple, and it's kind of with my overall, despite the deployment, the fact that Ospf v2 deployment dwarfs Ospf v3, to try and allow everything to be done with Ospf v3.
Les Ginsberg, I'm just curious, given this apparently got positive reviews, why aren't the authors more enthusiastic? Why do we even have to have this discussion?
Alvaro is. Yeah, Alvaro is. But he can't, if he sponsor his own draft, that would not be a good precedent.
Well, yeah, but he can resubmit it as an author, yes?
Yes.
But Chris Bowers again. I mean, this is actually quite a good opportunity to sort of experiment with a mode of operation where the working group decides that, yes, we want to work on it. Perhaps the sort of usual suspects are not necessarily the ones who have cycles to do it, but we find some new blood to work on these who maybe haven't authored drafts.
Okay. Oh, one more. New blood.
Sure. Right. The first question is the working group interested? If it's a good idea and it happens that the current authors don't have cycles, the working group chairs can always appoint an appropriate editor. And it would be, of course, very interesting to know if there are people who, in fact, are so interested in the work that they would be happy to help. On the list, that's all.
Yeah. Okay, Padma.
Okay. Padma, I'm one of the authors and I'm presenting it on behalf of my co-authors today. So service distribution draft, I'm just going to a little bit over in detail what the draft is, but we can have a discussion on why we need this or not. So first, why? Today, more and more of the routing protocols have been used to actually carry information because we have a pretty cool flooding. However, two things. We can't flood a huge amount of information which is not routing related. In the past, we've tried that. And actually, before this draft was written, there was multiple trials at Cisco where we experimented with how much data we could actually carry in the opaque LSAs, which is typically what we just do, and we just stuff the information there and we expect it to work. But it does have some limitations. And one other thing that was interesting is that not all the data needs to be everywhere. And once you put it in actually the flooding for the link state, well, you do have it on every single router, which might not be efficient. Not only it might be too much for the routers, but it might also affect the performance. So there's something that I didn't write in the draft, but I want to say that this draft will try to use the instance, transport instance draft in OSPF, where typically we would like to see some of those information that we're going to get exchanged here in the transport instance.
That was a draft that we did have working group instances interest in, especially among the people that were doing GMPLS with optical. They thought it might be interesting to have transport instance for that and have different, for different topologies and groups. But we didn't get any implementations, and it had some, we thought, okay, are we just going to go, standardize this without implementations? It had a unique concept. You had like a multi-hop neighbor that if you weren't using for routing, you could just have a remote neighbor. That was a nice concept too. But I guess we didn't sell it well enough.
I think you didn't have any killer function feature trying to use it. So let's see whether this one actually helps it. All right. So like I said, we have data scale, and scale of how many services you can actually support is an issue. So there's also the evolution of requirements. So some of the requirements are tied to those data and those services are, you want to have a large number of services. You don't want to have any kind of assumption on the topology. You might imagine that some of the routers only are interested in the service, but not every router. They might not even be directly connected to each other. There is no assumption about uniqueness or anything like that. We really want it to be very generic. Regarding the data handling requirements, again, we have no assumption on size. We're not trying to limit it. And we'll see how we're going to solve this. And we really want something else, which is, like we said, the routing and the non-routing information to be separated, and actually the non-routing information not impacting the router, because this is going to be a big concern. And there's a couple of things here. I'm just going to not go for all of them, but I'll let you discover them. That means you'll have to read the draft. Additional requirements, of course, backward compatibility. This is OSPF. We're very, very adamant on backward compatibility, and no impact on routing. But here is something that's very interesting, and I wanted to actually draw people's attention on that, is that the moment we start putting an ID, a service that we actually will carry and we get calculated path to them, it's almost as if we're creating dynamic address families inside OSPF, which actually makes it pretty much cool for a lot of other applications than the one that I'm actually using here. Now, I call this a service distribution router. Disclaimer, this name is going to change to something cooler, hopefully. I know it doesn't sound, I think, really what it is right now. It's not really a distribution.
But besides that, it clashes with the very well chosen term secure domain router.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, most probably, I'm working on that. So the next iteration of the draft will change the name of the draft most probably as well. So we know we want to leverage the IGP capability to discover the other SDRs. I'm still going to use that acronym today, and flood only topological information of the SDRs. And being able to compute path to them, but also being able to advertise some directory of services. Imagine each one of those routers has a number of services that they can advertise, and that could be, some of the discussions that we're having just earlier about TE, whether you actually want to have that information that can be used by multiple places. Well, TE might not be the best example here because it is a routing information, but you can imagine other things like that might be used. The actual data propagation right now, I want it to be outside of OSPF for everything which is above a certain size. And I think this is outside the scope of the document, but that's pretty free and flexible. So this fancy stuff here, diagram, is actually showing two things. That you have the OSPF database, usually where the opaque LSA resides, which is completely within OSPF. And even if you have the opaque LSA data inside a transport instance, that's still inside OSPF. But you can imagine to have a service database where you actually have all those data which is not related to routing, that can be in or outside the router, or can be on a remote, disk or in the cloud somewhere. You just need to actually be able to write on it. And you might have agents who actually access this for APIs. It is way beyond the scope of this document, but I want to actually show what we can do with it. With producers of information actually updating it and consumers independently accessing it. How about inside the IGP? What are the route operations that we actually want to actually look at? So we really want new producers to advertise services, new services that are coming up, whether they start or stop. And we also want to know whether consumers are, whether there are consumers for some services or not. Because it might be interesting to prune some of those if there are no consumers for those information. Discovery, I think OSPF has a pretty cool discovery mechanism, and that would be one way to do that. If you had services ID, you can actually create here using a route discovery with the LSD capabilities to find out where some of these routers have these capabilities. And I'm actually reserving the bit 6 for that here. That's pretty standard. Here is actually mapping the service ID with an actual routable address. And this address can be before the 6 and actually could be anything else. Because it's just a mapping service. One thing that I did add here compared to, yes?
I had one question, and I believe the answer is they have local scope only. But the service idea, is it local scope within the domain, routing domain only, or is it something that we would have an IANA registry for?
We will have a registry for it, but I will show something later what I'm thinking of. But of course, it's open for discussion, and suggestion from the working group. One thing that I did change compared to the other drafts is these service stacks, because when we had the operator TLV, they were trying to carry a few information, and I realized that maybe we don't want to go into the whole service database for, if you want to add a tag or something like that. So, which is one of the reasons I added the service stack to it. And here is, the directory of services. And these are the ones that are going to be in the transport instance. Now, the cool thing is that for service IDs, you can have independent metrics, and you would be able to actually run SPF on those independent metrics. And that can give you cool applications where your service IDs are not really tied to the IGP metrics, but the service metrics themselves. And that will be pretty much give you a lot of flexibility on that one. And here are the preferred SDRs. This is another concept that I might have some preferred routers that I want to use. So this is what I was talking about. It seems that I actually started to try and actually do something. Originally, the draft didn't have any prescription about the service IDs numbering and allocation, but I think it would be interesting to have that, especially for experimental, so that people can play with it. And I think it will be applicable to a lot of people who are trying to do, for example, private, services using OSPF. That will avoid us having to do TLVs and carry them and, et cetera.
Well, in that case, I would suggest part of the range just have for local use, not experimentation.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. Yeah. All right, so that's about it. I would really like this to be a working group document if people have interest in it.
Tony P. Okay, so a piece on 2 themes. So one is relatively simple. With all the stuff you meshed in, there's a concept which is called the scope of a service does not necessarily align with the scope of flooding. Okay, so one thing won't be enough, right? There are some things which may be only crossing the link, some things which will be within area, but there will be some things that will have a defined radius, which is non-congruent. Yes, congruent. The second one goes all the way to the comment 1.5 years ago, which probably kind of went over everyone's head, and I was just also BSing partially. That was the discussion on the BFT micro thingy, where we were carrying these things that had a really funky name in ISIS, and we had another TLV. Routing as infra is built, right? This is a different layer. The service access points, subservice access points are well understood, albeit there it's ancient crap, right? So if you want to get into this game, and discipline will be necessary, so not everybody can farm their own little TLV. What carrying de facto what is subservice access points, like in case of micro BFT, right? We'll find funky names and always a reason to get another TLV. Do we want to get into this game? I don't know. Will we run out of TLV code points? Most likely. No? Well, so, you know, that's the question, right? Otherwise, we just farm these things arbitrarily and life's good and everybody's different scope and represent something alternatively different, and we basically have a flat space. So that kind of closes the theme.
I brought this up in case you wanted to use it to address that.
It went away.
Oh. What happened here?
Yeah. So,
you were going to address Tony's, I thought, but maybe. Okay.
No.
Go ahead. Not so fast.
Yeah, so regarding the scope, I think there is some discussion there that we need to have, and I agree. I think we need to think about this a little bit better. Originally, what my thoughts were is that some of the services have local scope and some of them have global scope, and that's what or link local scope or something like that. And what I was really thinking of is that the SDRs exchange enough information that we can actually compute a path to them, depending on where you want them to be. But I must admit, I didn't give it more thought than, hey, we can play with the different scopes in our SPF. That's all. But it would be a worthwhile thing to think about this. Maybe add a scope on the services. Did that answer your question? Kind of.
Chris Hobbs, Deutsche Telekom. So when you say service, I didn't read the draft. I'm sorry, but I followed along. And is this like, can I be talking about like random things that I launch in my network and I want to advertise the fact that they're running at these various places and that they sort of inject their information into OSPF and then okay. So it's like sort of a directory, right? It's creating a directory almost, right?
Yes.
I think back to the days when you launched the multicast and it took about 30 minutes for all your stuff to show up, all the things that were available, right? This wouldn't take 30 minutes, but okay. So when you go, can you go to the packet thing when you said IPv4 v6? This one? Yeah.
One more, I guess.
One more. No more. Yeah.
This one.
This
yeah.
one.
So was that the ID or was that the map, the address of the service?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, this is one of the TLVs that actually helps you to map the service ID with a routable
With an
address.
actual place, right?
And actually, the moment that you have the idea of it is that you might want to have some IDs and actually compute them with a different metric and have the ability to actually have proximity or geographical location.
Yeah, so the reachable thing, it's good, it's variable, and I don't think, I mean, I immediately would think of a different layer, right? Like a v4, v6 plus port or something, right? And then that immediately made me think of Dockers and containers and stuff,
Yeah,
which was
so
my last comment.
one thing that
You could be doing that. You know how you have the dynamic ports all nowadays?
Yeah.
And
Actually, if you look at the address format is actually gives you a number of types. Right now, I define only 2 types, but I was rereading the draft yesterday night and I'm saying, yeah, I should actually put the format and say it can be
Yeah, because
any format. will
anybody
work.
setting up like a Kubernetes or a Docker Swarm or whatever, right? This is an obvious place to
Yeah,
advertise. This is the address. This is the port.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, commingling the concept of a reachability metric with the service cost, with the service metric is not a particularly good idea. Those are hugely orthogonal concepts, but that's, like falls out within the work, right? So it's just a footnote.
The reason why I did that was for a very specific reason, is because I do think that some services might actually want to follow the IGPs, but not all of them. And that will give you a one way to actually compute that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you should describe the interaction between the IGP metric and the service metric so people can review it.
Okay. I was thinking next time when I present it, I'll try to give, a few examples, and I think that will help a lot.
Yeah, I guess it is. One thing I'd like to comment, just a general comment, is the presentation is different than what's in the current draft.
No.
Some way, well, there's a lot of client and server terminology in the current draft. Yeah, I mean, it is different. The presentation is different than the draft.
It's a little bit different because I intend to actually clean up the draft a little bit.
Okay.
And I actually, I refreshed it because we needed to discuss about it. But some of the client service and etc. is more related to really how we want to use the service database.
Yeah.
And that gives actually the customers who are registered one way to go. But I think it's kind of a little beyond OSPF, and I was thinking of removing it from the draft. Yeah.
So, Robert Leszuk, so I have a fundamental question. Why do you want to flood information about addresses of services as opposed to node querying it, like even with DNS, where is my service IP address? What's the purpose of actually flooding this? It doesn't change dynamically every minute, right? So
No, you're not going to change dynamically.
Right.
So
why
not
just
this
query?
way. But here's the stuff, right? You're a DNS, you're going to use a DNS, or you're going to advertise IP addresses, but not services. And today, there's nothing that actually enables you to advertise services per se.
The name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
But, yeah, go ahead.
No, it's Jabber. Jabber does this, right? SVR and it reverse maps.
Yeah, but one thing is that it's very difficult to actually compute a preferred path or not. That's not, you're going to get something which is pre-registered and that's it. You're not going to be able to change it. You're not going to be able to configure it. But, I think that, honestly, I think the draft needs to be reworked a little bit, and I invite more people to come and actually, I'm open to suggestions and comments, and I think, it can be made better. There are some things that maybe we could actually remove from it if the working group doesn't like it, but I'm open.
So that's the answer to Robert's. I mean, services are layered in terms of scope and level at which you want to discover them. So the most extreme example would be micro BFD, right? What you really want is understand that the other node, and it's very local, provides a service to run BFD, and the micro BFD is a subservice access point. I have multiple of those in final resolution. And then by God, you don't want to do this over DNS, right? Okay, of course you don't want to carry worldwide Jabber stuff over this stuff, right? But if you have something like containers, like flapping UDP ports, that could be just as the right resolution compared to something like DNS secure resolution, which, yeah, okay. That's probably way beyond time-wise. So there is a reason for this work. And I mean, we're doing it on a daily basis. I mean, we're pimping this flooding thing with this, let's have another TLD with a little, opaque thingy. That's how you discover that. If the routing protocol is not parsing it, it's by God the service access point. Right. So we were sticking those things with all these semantics where we really had no reason. It was just an access point for an upper layer. They need to understand there's a service on it.
If you put the word container in here too, everyone will start paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah. So disclaimer.
Container service
Yeah.
discovery.
That's one of the reasons I really think some of the naming in the draft has to change, because originally I presented this back in IETF in Paris. And at the time, people felt it was very interesting. But then I had a hiatus from IETF for 2.5 years, and it went into oblivion. So I'm back. So that's why I think there's still interest on this. A lot of people have been talking about this, but I do want to have one generic way of doing this. And you're right, we're kind of doing it all over the place, and that's a little bit what the ISIS, Gen Apps have been trying to do to give some focus.
Les Ginsberg, so this is about more than
Gen Apps.
service discovery.
Yeah.
This is also about advertising whatever this service wants to advertise.
Yes.
This is why you're suggesting that it may cover the operator-defined TLD
Yeah.
use cases,
Mhm.
in which case it does seem to me very analogous to what GenApp was in ISIS was intended to address. And what GenApp does is it created an IANA registry for the applications to go get an identifier. So that, I mean, in the case of ISIS, it was needed because we took one top TLD code point.
Mhm.
We didn't want to allocate a code point for every potential application, but
Yeah.
we didn't have enough. So I'm just wondering if we can marry those two concepts.
Yeah, I thought about this actually, and I was wondering whether I want to have one code point or applications or not. One thing with that is I was trying to make it as flexible as possible for people to be able to use that space to do experimental things on their network. And I was wondering whether that's going to be a problem eventually. So that's why.
Oh, yeah, so not on the details of the technology, but on how I'm making progress. One of the things you said was sort of next time having examples, and in the spirit of working more quickly, and given that, as you said, there's a fair amount of changes to the draft. Normally we work on text, but in this case, can I suggest, pull together a little presentation, record it, send out the video, and that will help drive conversation. Some of the other working groups like IDR, when they have a virtual interim, they ask someone to record a presentation about it. It's been this idea, it seems like there's a fair amount of interest. As Chris says, if we just say container, 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 people will pay attention. Let's not have it stall out on IETF clicks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Great idea. Definitely. That sounds
Yeah.
good.
So we'll wait for the rework draft. The one quick thing I had, it was really apparent how it would work for service discovery and advertisement of parameters to the service of the services. It wasn't apparent to me, and I believe it says clients rather than consumers in the draft.
Oh, it says consumers.
Okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't apparent to me whether they advertise themselves as consumers or if the producers advertised its list of consumers. It was really nebulous. I couldn't tell that.
Okay, so let me get a little bit of background, where the draft evolved, with my musings at the same time.
Yeah.
Originally, what we were trying to do is actually exchange a huge amount of information between 2 points and actually finding what is the best place to actually get this information. And for that, what we really wanted is to have some out-of-band data, storage and exchange. And one example would have been, for example, you have many subscribers wanting to watch the Olympics, and everybody is trying to get the same information. Do you want to actually download that same information 20 times? Today we have, fast forward 4 years.
I think that's being solved in other working groups. So,
Yeah.
so please don't use that example.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So fast forward 4 years, now we have all these other groups that are doing that. But I still do see value in the other places, which is why I want to simplify the draft to remove some of these, but to keep what I think is still of essence for this working group.
Okay, so we'll wait for, I'm going to take your comment, but so we'll wait for the next version, and please start the discussion right away, not in the next, way before Korea or anything. Okay.
2 to 3 weeks.
Yes, yes.
So the service access point discovery and possibly parameters of the service and the reachability is the job of the infra. Trying to push anything which is semantics of the service, like receiver list and so on, is a tar pit.
Yeah.
And it generates all the information we don't want to carry anyway. So that would, I would stay very far away from that.
Yeah, so
Thanks.
definitely, I'm open to suggestions and comments and,
Okay.
but I do think there's a core idea, which is an interesting one. Okay?
Okay. This is one of the drafts we want a working group last call, the next one. Not service distribution. And I saw that Shaka had taken a good approach. I read it actually on the way and added her to the agenda. She made some slides because I think this satisfies everybody's requirements on the original draft. Addresses all the concerns that people had with the original.
Hello everyone, Shraddha talking on behalf of my co-authors on the latest update for this draft. So I have presented this draft in IETF 91, 92, and this has been stable for some time, and there was a good amount of discussion on the list about the draft. Let's just see a quick recap on what the draft is trying to address. So when the link is supposed to be taken out of service, the traffic has to be diverted away from the link. So the way this can be done is to increase the metric on the link, but it's required that you also increase the metric on the other side of the link. So this is where this becomes a difficult problem to manually do this in a overlay kind of scenario wherein from the underlay network, if a node has to be taken out of service, then there are a lot of devices on the remote side where you have to go and change the metric, which becomes difficult manually. So you need a mechanism to say that this particular link is going to be taken out of service, and the remote end automatically sets the metric high so that the traffic gets diverted. So the motivation for the solution is ease of maintenance and automated upgradation and minimize the traffic loss. So we don't want to take the link out of the service immediately. We want to increase the metric and keep the traffic flowing so that if there are no alternate paths, the operators can take appropriate measures to move the traffic out. So basically, we had a discussion on the list regarding whether this information has to be link local scope or area scope. And we have use cases which requires a link local scope, as well as we have few controller-based use cases where this information has to be area-wide. So we wanted to give that option. So initial drafts had only area scope advertisement, and we wanted to give the on the list there was suggestion that we can do it we can give an option where we can do it link local scope or area scope based on where the use case this is being used. So in the latest update, we have this, go next one. So the link overload sub TLV. So that's just the type which says this link is going for overload. And this gets based on what use case it is. It can be advertised link local scope or it can be advertised area scope. So if it's link local scope, it gets advertised in the link local RILSA. And if it's area scope, it gets advertised in the area scope RILSA and gets attached to a link TLV. So the semantics of link TLV is similar to what is described in RFC 3630. So you have which describes a link, and then this link overload sub TLV gets attached to the link to say that this link is under overload. And the procedures how this receiver processes this information, that there's no change from previous drafts, previous versions of the draft. So that all that remains same. What's changed is the advertisement in which LSA this gets advertised, and there is two different scopes in which this can be done. So that's about the update.
So I mean, I think this, as you remember, the initial suggestion was, why don't you put this in link local in the hellos, link local signaling in the hellos? And we came up, we said, well, we can really, there's no reason the router information LSA can be link scoped. So you could just use that. And if you only, if it's a deployment where it only needs to go to the other end of the links, they can increase their metric to max metric, because you have to have, if you're only taking one link out of service, just setting yours to max metric doesn't help. You have to set it to max metric in both directions. We decided we could do this and just use the same link local LSA. Now, I like this so much. We're going to change. It's not a working group document, but it has a similar type of scoping of information for different use cases. The geolocation draft, we're going to change it to use this technique as well. How many have read this draft? Oh, good. No, how many? Oh, any version. How many read any version? Okay. Okay, a big one. How many have read this version? Just I guess only a couple. Okay, so please read it. We're going to kind of do a prepare people to working group last call and see if we can get it working group last called in the next month or so.
Hey, Peter Pshenak, Cisco. So just a quick question. Why do you use RILSA? Because this is like the link information. Wouldn't it be more appropriate to make it part of the extended link LSA and says, this link is overloaded?
The extended link LSA, I did have, in fact, the previous versions had the extended link LSA.
I didn't read this one, sorry.
Yeah, so the issue is you also need a link local scope. So I thought link local RILSA is the right place. And then you have this link overload sub TLV.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Link overload sub TLV, which does not carry any information. And if it goes in extended link LSA, then you need extended link LSA has formats which is corresponding to the router LSA in Ospf, which does not have the remote site's IP address. So it's difficult to, you need that information, remote site's IP address.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you advertise the link and suddenly the link is overloaded. So you have all the data to advertise the link. Now all you want to say, this link is overloaded. So, I mean, it looks to me like the router information LSA contains a lot of different stuff, which is like node specific. So, because this is link specific, I'm not sure if that's the right place. That's just a comment.
Yeah, sure. We can probably discuss on the list.
Yes.
Equip first. Zoe came off the infinite metric, so the Quagga doesn't change the implementation. Okay.
It only discourages traffic, doesn't prevent it.
Okay. All right. So that's fine. My only question would be, what will you do if not all the routers in the area understand that you'll have the other routers still shoving traffic towards you, expecting you to forward using this link, why you don't?
So,
I'm lost, Sabrina.
So, yeah, sure. I'll answer that. So, what the routers are supposed to do with this TLV is to increase the metric. They're not supposed to do anything else. Because if somebody does not understand.
But if some routers see one metric on this link, some other routers different metric, you end up with incongruent SPFs.
It's going to change the metric in the router LSA, which everybody understands.
Okay, then I have to read. Fine.
Yes. Yeah, the idea is you signal on the link to the other guy, and he would increase his metric.
Yes. So every yeah.
Okay.
Les Ginsberg, so I'm sort of anticipating that you're going to suggest to do the same thing in ISIS, and to follow Peter's comment, the analogous thing to do in ISIS would be to have a link scoped router capabilities TLV, and I would be quite opposed to that.
We'll talk in ISIS.
Yeah, I should talk in ISIS working group probably.
Okay, that's last. I got one more slide. I don't have it on the thing yet. I didn't know if we'd have time.
do I get this thing to go?
If it is.
I know, I only have time, but I didn't put it in my, I'll just bring it up.
Actually, I have a question on the last one.
Okay.
So, I mean, so the idea is you're taking a link out of service, right? What's the different measurement? I mean, and the problem with, just taking the link out of the SPT is that you get micro loops or, I mean, what's the measured difference here between just saying the link's gone or it's saying it's overloaded? Yeah.
Yes. Well,
The idea is to use it as a last resort link. So if you just take it out of the service,
What am I doing with it? I mean, why am I doing this? So I'm not taking the link out of service?
so you need to move the traffic away from the link even before you take it out of the service. And to do that, you need to you have to do it on all this from both the sides.
But I'm eventually taking the link out of service. Right?
Yes.
Like say I'm going to turn the light off, I'm going to move it. So I mean, I don't know. Are we solving a real problem here?
I don't see Louis in the audience, but I talked to Louis about this because I asked Louis if he really wanted this. He said, yes, what I want to do is I want to take the link out of service, but leave it as a last resort and make sure my traffic actually diverts from it before I really take it out of service.
Okay.
Like he doesn't trust the routing to work. And I thought, well, I sat down and had a cup of coffee with him on this and talked to him about that. Yeah, he's not here right now.
Service that the service providers are giving. So when they are taking out the node out of the service, they want to make sure the overlay stuff for the customers, it gets diverted even before.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, sure.
So one quick question. You want to have the peddling granularity or is it like always when you take the node out?
No, it's
No, so node, when I'm taking node out, I'm talking about the node being taken out from the underlay, not from OSPF perspective.
Okay.
So for OSPF, it's still a link, and it's the underlay device that's being taken out.
But you want the peddling granularity,
Yes.
taking this link
For
and all the rest
OSPF,
of the links?
it's per link, yes.
Sorry, not done yet. So again, I didn't read the latest version, but my recollection is there was some discussion about what to do about using link for TE purposes. Is that correct? My memory
Yes,
correct?
I think we have the metric and all of that in the draft.
So what was what's your current resolution of that question?
So this, the way the IGP metric gets set to max metric on the other side, the TE metric also gets set to max metric on the other side.
So this is with the single advertisement affects both.
Yeah.
We're not trying to do
Separate. Yes.
Okay, I just want to make one clarification on this. We have stub router to take, and we have H-bit now to take a whole node out of service. The reason which puts the links to the link max metric, which isn't the same as LSA max metric. It's only 16-bit infinity as opposed to 24-bit infinity. But the reason you can't just set your link to this discouraging metric and have it work is because with stub router, all your links are set to that. So it does discourage, you can unilaterally discourage traffic. But for just a single link, the guy in the other direction, the other end of your link has to set it to max metric as well. Because you can see, because you have other links that are non-max metric, you're not really discouraging traffic over that link by setting it coming out of you as max metric. Okay.
Also another use case is if you set a router to stub router, it only increases your metric on the outgoing links. You also need from the other side to get.
You don't need it really for that case. We can talk about that.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, per link. Yeah. Yes. For transit. Yes. I just put together. Okay.
Sure.
So
take this discussion to the list?
Sure.
Do you want to initiate it? Say, please look at this new version
Yeah,
and read.
sure. I'll do that, yeah.
Okay, thanks. As if all the offers, please start discussion on the list on your drafts that are in progress, either active working group drafts or ones being considered for adoption. One thing, I just got 2 slides here, and then I'm going to let everybody go get some coffee or something cooler. I think we have now this isn't, I don't think this is only OSPF, but we really need more eyes to look at these documents, both, during working group adoption and as they're revised than we have. And especially, working group last calls, try and get more people interested in it. Typically, you have a very small community, including the authors and the working group chairs and people that are want it deployed, except for things like segment routing that are very, deployed. That's an exception, and hopefully the Yang model too, because that's going to be implemented. Everybody's going to be implemented right away. But for all these other drafts, I'd like to get more people. Now, I have two things to do. One is to have like an OSPF review team, and the other, well, MPLS does that, but at least you don't think so. And the other one is to try and assign a shepherd early and have them try and get more eyes on it.
So, I'd like to echo definitely we need more reviews on these documents. That's where we get the value added. It's really important to get good, solid reviews. The reason that documents end up progressing slowly, the reason they end up timing out and we end up saying, well, people were interested, is because we're not getting the reviews. Things can go fast and well with reviews. That said, one of the signals that reviews send in the process is that there are people who care and are interested in a particular draft. And so while our process requires certain reviews to happen after working group last call as a way of verifying the quality, forcing additional mandatory reviews before the working group last call process can make it look as if there is interest in a document when there is actually only interest in assisting in the IETF. And that's my concern around having a formalized review team.
Okay.
Adrian Farrell, I want to echo the last bit of what Elias said, that one reason I don't review documents, I make an active choice to not review a document, is I don't want to spin cycles polishing an idea I think is poor. I don't want to have the fight with an idea that I don't care about. And I don't want to give the impression that there is active support for an idea. I would like to ask the chairs at what point they think they should draw a line under a piece of work when there's maybe 2 or 3 people interested, and that seems to be it for the whole community.
So that's let a sleeping dog lie from an old dog.
Okay, so I'm about the last to comment how to make pieces work and stuff, but processes work. So there's multiple aspects. One aspect is I provide reviews, from the routing directorate. Yeah. Sorry. So and people show after 6 months the authors still didn't come back to me, which means that the authors don't care. All right. So it goes from all kinds of sides, and I think it goes. Towards 2 solutions. Either we provide an economy, right? We do no reward following up. People just dump the stuff out, look for traction, And then there's very little reward in all the painful process to, get the baby all the way to the RFC stuff. Okay, so we somehow have to change the reward system or penalize. Like if you have 20-0-0 draft, right, that counters the IETF spirit completely, right? So the other way to think about is that we had much stronger tyranny of good ideas, if you know the concept, right? The good ideas had more traction and the bad ideas have been dismissed much earlier. We got far more permissive. Right, so that's like, okay, if there's only 3 people interested in stuff, hey, by all means, check the stuff. It doesn't need an IETF document. But which way to go, I have no opinion. I just observed that the process inherently has no incentives to provide good reviews, right? And lots of the reviews have no value if you put the cycles. And one thing that is finite is time.
Yes.
Okay.
So some observation from routing working group.
Just your name.
Just in service. So rather than trying to shepherd every single document by ourselves, the few last documents we assigned other shepherds. We asked for people to participate, and they did, and we did it early, which results in better quality documents and really good discussion between the shepherd and the authors. So from process perspective, maybe would be right thing to do to assign shepherd after working group adoption. So they work together, and then result is.
I think that's the what I'm hearing is the second option is the one to try and to have both another reviewer and another person that's independent, not an author, adding some level of judgment as to whether the idea should go forward.
If we adopt document, we assume there's interest, right?
Yes.
Number.
I mean, I hate to be the King Solomon of OSPF, the gatekeeper of everything,
King David would work, right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
No. Number 2, so the directorate reviews, it's a cumbersome process. It takes 2 weeks before someone comes back, and then usually first 3 people refuse, and you go back again. It's like trying to recompute the path, right? So it takes 2-3 months just to get a person to review, and another 3 months to get something of the person. I think we need to change something.
Aliyah, once again, because this is something I think is a real important to talk about and important to try different options for. First, I would strongly recommend asking for a document shepherd earlier or later. It does not need to be, as we've of course talked, the chairs. And in fact, if there's not somebody who's interested and willing to do the work of shepherding the document, that is another indirect signal of the interest in the work. I have in more draconian moments considered ideas such as saying that working group drafts that haven't made any significant technical changes in a year go away. And I'm not saying, I understand implementations, and I'm not saying that that is the case, but let's face reality. If someone actually wants the stuff done, they put cycles into it and go and encourage for the interoperability. If there's documents that are sitting around without being worked on after adoption, they don't have to stay there, right? The other piece I would say is there is a fine line. We care about the implementations, we care about the deployments. It may be the case that the reason there are 2 or 3 people who are responding is not because there isn't a need for an interoperable standard, but because the organizations that care are not participating very much in the IETF. And so we need to be aware a little bit on the outreach and encouraging side, understanding, encouraging the authors to go pull people who actually do care in.
Okay.
Just a few brainstorms.
Okay, last comment.
Lou Berger, appreciative that I get the last word. That's cool. Two comments. One is about documents sitting around. If it's sitting around from inaction of authors, I agree, kill it. If it's sitting around because it's waiting for some other work to progress and you want to have it, it's totally different, exactly. The other thing is on Shepherd. There's one question in the Shepherd write-up that I actually think is the most important one as a working group chair, which is, do you believe as shepherd that the document is ready to progress, to be published? Okay. And so you might want to think about why you're assigning the shepherd. There's some shepherds who can really help the document mature from a writing standpoint, from a clarity standpoint, and that is hugely valuable. But you may want to have a different shepherd to give that final stamp of, yeah, it's really ready to go.
Okay.
Maybe we need a new role. Maybe we need a new
right,
role.
Right. Okay, one more word. One more word.
Oh,
After Chris, the line is cut off.
There's something I think which is important also is that some of the authors, when they do have a document shepherd, they should understand that the shepherd is trying to do to mature the document. And sometimes what I've seen is that there's a lot of discussion with the shepherd on an unwillingness to change it because they consider this work has been last called. So now I don't want to change it. And maybe there might be something that we want to discuss about what is the prescription between the author and the shepherd so that we do not waste so much of cycles.
So yeah, this is a totally different topic. I've been hearing something about good and bad IGPs all week. Where did this stop? Could you guys clarify what?
Strike off that from the comments.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I will say that my experience with the routing directory review has been better than this. I haven't had any problems with people not taking my comments. I mean, or at least not addressing them, not necessarily incorporating everything I say, but at least they've addressed them. Oh, that's true. I forgot.
Tony, we are done.
I know. No, it was actually. No, it was actually worse, right? People, I get this review for a hugely complicated draft, happened 2 or 3 times, and I spent time to dig the 12 iterations, right? I send them comments, and they only come back 6 months later after, after like ADs or whatever, I hot on the tail, and they expect the answer within 2 days. Meanwhile, my context is like, like on tape storage, somewhere on the shelf, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I can take care of the blue suits. You can. Yeah. Hey, good seeing you again. Enjoyed it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Oh, 6.
Button down now.
Yeah. Oh. Okay. Yeah. What are they?
Yeah, that's fine. Here it is.